I worked 100 hours a week for over 4 years, and it seriously did suck, but it did get easier week by week once I learned how to manage my time and tasks properly. In this video, I'm going to tell you how I used to schedule and the problems that started causing, and then how I schedule now. At the end of the video, I'll also give you a summary of all the main changes that I made so you can go and apply those yourself. If you're new to this channel, welcome. I'm Dr. Justin Sung. I'm a learning researcher, learning coach, and head of learning at I Can Study. I'm also a former medical doctor. For the last decade, I have worked with tens of thousands of people around the world to help them learn more efficiently. Now, before we jump into it, I'd really appreciate if you give this video a like. It really helps with the algorithm. So for some background information, I didn't work 100 hours a week because I thought it was cool. To be honest, I just had a lot of things I was interested in, and I had probably still do have an extreme personality. As I've talked about in some of my other videos, in my first year of uni trying to enter medical school, I was studying 120 hours a week, sometimes even more. And mostly because I was just really inefficient at learning, which fast forward is kind of the reason why I do what I do now. You definitely don't need to be studying 120 hours a week to enter into medical school unless you have no idea what you're doing, like me. When I entered medical school, I wasn't studying as much, maybe around 30 hours a week, but then I started tutoring and I was doing that to between 20 to 40 hours per week. I was really involved in university clubs, committee events, and organizing conferences. So that was like another 10 to 15 hours per week. It's also the time of my life where I was starting to get really into reading through learning science research and getting deeper into my teaching. So that's when I did my adult learning and teaching certification. That was like another 10 hours a week. Eventually, I would end up setting up a non-profit organization here in New Zealand, mentoring students from lower socioeconomic positions, teaching them some of the skills that I'd picked up over the years. So for a period of my time, I was managing a non-profit, starting a new business, tutoring, full-time study with medical school, doing university club events, all simultaneously. And then when I started working as a doctor, it was even worse because I was doing 60-hour rosters. And in that kind of period of my life, like early 20s, it was just like a lifestyle for me. If you ask any of my uni friends, they'll tell you that I was always busy, but doing all of that stuff is what made me feel really energized. So, it's kind of, if you love what you're doing, then, time flies. Now, just so no one misunderstands me, I want to make a couple things really, really clear. First of all, I wasn't doing 100 hours a week consistently every single week during those years. I would do probably between 80 to 100 hours a week. And I did take some time off, like when I went on holiday for, like a couple weeks. I tried not to work so much, and there would have been some weeks in there where I did, less than 30 or 40 hours. Secondly, I am incredibly privileged. In fact, a lot of what I've achieved is because I am privileged. I don't come from a really well-off family. My parents are immigrants and, just trying to make ends meet. But I was well supported. I didn't have any stresses at home. My parents and, loved ones supported me through that. I didn't have a lot of other responsibilities. I didn't have any dependents. So I was able to just focus on myself. And I know that that is something that a lot of people aren't able to do. So in that way, I was very lucky. Now, having worked with so many people that do have all these other things going on, I know how much more challenging it can be. And if you're one of those people that are in that type of situation and you're watching this video, then I think the advice that I'll give you will help you as well. Thirdly, and this is important, I do not recommend working and studying as much as I did. It is not a better or a cooler way to live. It was just my personal decision, and I just wanted to do more things. I think in today's culture, it is incredibly admirable to say, no, I don't want to buy into the whole hustle mentality, and kind of just like sticking to what you really want for yourself. If you don't want to be that busy, then there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Just because you're not working and studying so much that you pee blood, it doesn't make you a more inferior person. This is a video for people who want to do more and do all of those things and are struggling to fit it all in. I'm just sharing some of the things that I learned that made it easier to balance and not fall behind. Okay, so how did I schedule and why did it not work out? At the start, I used to schedule using a physical notebook. In fact, this physical notebook, I trawled through my cupboard and found the actual notebook that I was using to schedule and track my tasks back when I was like 17, 18 years old. And I used to have these very ambitious to-do lists. And it used to just look like this, you know, fairly straightforward to-do lists. I just crossed things off when I got them done. I was also very, very strict with myself, partly because I was so sleep deprived and emotionally fragile. I started writing like really abusive things to myself in my to-do list. Yes, I know, like I already mentioned this, I had a very extreme personality, but like I would say, you know, like I'd call myself like, I would insult myself in my own to-do list. I'll tell myself like, imagine if you fail, and yeah. So anyway, it was really, really bad. Actually very abusive sort of things. And then eventually I started doing some basic kind of like really, really basic daily scheduling. And you can see this is kind of what it looked like. Just like, you know, writing down each day and then what I was gonna do that day. And then at some point I must have discovered the concept of time blocking, where you just block out periods of time in your day to do certain tasks. And you can see that I attempted to do these sort of time blocks just on paper like that. I mean, you can see it's essentially just like a calendar with times blocked out to study different things. So that was how I managed my time and my tasks for the first year of those 100-hour weeks. And in order to make sure that I got everything finished, I would sacrifice sleep, which is again why I just slept very, very little. And if it wasn't already clear, do not do that. If you need to be writing abusive things to yourself in a to-do list and reminding yourself what will happen if you fail and just sacrificing sleep every single day, there is something wrong with the methods that you're using, and please realize that earlier than I did. So in summary, what I was doing is I was using a physical schedule, I was being very strict and not giving myself any room for error, and I was compromising sleep to get everything done. Every single one of these behaviors is problematic. First of all, using a physical notebook to schedule and manage my tasks. This is probably the most minor point of them all, but I would never really go back to doing it that way now. By using a physical schedule, but then also having lots of tasks to do, it made it very difficult to adjust my plan if things went a little bit wrong. Like, yes, I could just literally like open it up and like, you know, scribble things out and then rewrite my plan, but it just takes too long, couldn't be bothered, and it just increases that friction. So it makes me less likely to make these small adjustments and stay on top of new circumstances or situations or priorities that arise. And as a principle that I always follow now, I always assume things will not go as planned. Right? Think about this. In any given week, there is a pretty good chance that something unexpected will happen. Now, we don't know what that unexpected thing is yet because it's unexpected, but we can say that something will happen. And just because we don't know what it is doesn't mean we can't plan for something. So to make it easier to do these little adjustments, I now use a digital calendar, and over the years I have experimented with a lot of different apps, and personally I just use Google Calendar now. It works very well for me. And I'll show you exactly how I block out my time and make my schedule at the end of this video. The second thing I used to do was set these really, really strict schedules with no room for error, followed by compromising sleep to try to get everything done. This is where the real problem begins, as in, this really screwed me over. And I would even say that by scheduling this way, it just eviscerated any chance and hope for me to stay on top of things and not fall behind. See, by having such a strict schedule, I had no time to like this video. But also, it made it impossible to plan. Let me explain. Firstly, I need to address the elephant in the room. Do not sacrifice sleep. Sacrificing sleep is rarely a good option. Trust me, as someone who has sacrificed much more sleep than I should have, please learn from my mistakes. Sometimes it is genuinely worthwhile to sacrifice sleep to get more done. But if you're having to do this consistently, that is not going to be sustainable. It's dangerous and it's counterproductive. Sleep is incredibly important for your brain's health. Research even suggests that sleep deprivation leads to dementia and Alzheimer's. But if you're like how I was, sacrificing sleep all the time, you probably don't really care about being healthy, you just want to be productive. So to you, I will say it is very counterproductive. Sleep is necessary for memory consolidation. It's what actually helps you use and retain the information that you learned during the day. Spending so many hours studying that you don't sleep is like spending all day trying to fill a bucket and then just before you go to sleep, you drill a hole in the bottom of it. Sleep is also incredibly important for cognitive performance. So when you're sleep deprived, you are a slower, less focused version of yourself. So now, not only do you have a hole in the bottom of your bucket, you have to fill that bucket during the day with only your feet. And you normally don't even realize how impaired you are. When I was really sleep deprived, I thought I was at my 70-80% of my peak. Years later, when I actually recovered from all that sleep dip, looking back on it now, I was probably only at 30%. But at the time, I just had no idea that that's how bad it was. You also can't really train yourself to sleep less. There's been a lot of research over the years around different sleep timings, and the research consistently trends towards the idea that you have to get a continuous 7 to 9 hours of sleep to function properly. And very, very few people can do with less than that. I personally need 8.5 to 9 hours of sleep per night, which is on the higher side, and actually it took me some years to accept that. The only thing that really does seem to reduce your sleep requirement is actually age. When people get older, they do require less sleep, but we're talking about when you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you maybe can do with less sleep. And based on my YouTube demographics, I'm guessing that that's not gonna be you for 99.9% of you. So when I had a really strict schedule and compromised on sleep, this is what would happen. I would have all of these things that I needed to get done, and then I'd put all of it into my schedule. And by the end of the day, I would get it all done because I took no rest and I didn't sleep. That combination meant that I had no break and I burnt out, and I became depressed. I was depressed for 10, 11 months, and it took me around 2 or 3 years to really fully recover from the physical and emotional burden of having just pushed myself so hard and being so sleep deprived for so long. Again, I seriously do not recommend any of the stuff that I did back then. And yes, before you leave that comment, I know I'm an idiot. So if we don't compromise on sleep, which is the smart thing to do, then this is what would happen. We'd have this huge list of things to do, and then we'd put them on the schedule, but because we need to sleep, we wouldn't get it all done. So how do we win? It seems on one hand, we either compromise on sleep and we lose, or on the other hand, we don't get everything done and we lose. The trick here is to pick your losses. It is true. You're gonna lose in one way, but sometimes we have to lose the game to win the championship. If we lose on sleep, we lose on a lot of things. It's like winning the game, but then your whole team is hospitalized afterwards. If we lose on not getting everything done that day, we can still recover from that. At the beginning, I said that having strict schedules and compromising on sleep makes it impossible to plan. This is the reason. Your schedule does not matter. It's what you do that matters. If every day you schedule more than you can achieve, and then every day you don't achieve that, the day you scheduled versus the day you lived are different. This is incredibly important. It's probably one of the most important lessons around time management in this video. To start improving your time management, you have to know how you're truly spending your time, not how you wish you could spend your time. Here's what I did that made things much easier. I stopped scheduling as much. Instead, I just set myself these big daily goals and just general time blocks for when I'd get things done, like morning for studying and then afternoon for work and then evening for club activities, something like that. And then I switched to time tracking instead. So I just simply measured how long I was spending on each of my tasks. And at the end of every week, I would just look at what my days really looked like. And after doing this for around 3 or 4 weeks, here's what I realized. Number one, it's very difficult to predict the time it takes to complete a task. Sometimes I would finish in half the amount of time that I thought it would take. Sometimes it would take 2 or 3 times longer. Over the years, I've gotten better at estimating time, but even now, to this day, after years of being attentive to this, I still under or overestimate by a margin of around 25%. That's a big margin. Number two, overestimating how long something takes is not a big problem. When you underestimate and then it takes you longer than you expected, it makes it difficult because now you have to go back and rearrange your tasks and priorities and reschedule things. It actually switches you out of the flow of the day and it makes you spend more time and effort and attention on shuffling things around. And also places more stress on you as well. If you overestimate and you finish earlier than you expected, well, now you've just got more free time that you can use however you want. And what I found was that trying to be ambitious with how long a task would take me was not actually worth it to squeeze out an extra 30 minutes or even a couple hours of extra productivity. It ended up being much better to plan for the worst and hit out a few of the smaller tasks if I did manage to finish some things earlier and I had an unexpected gap. And number three, flow is the most important thing of all. The amount of time it took for me to get stuff done varied wildly depending on what I did before or after that task or what time of day it was. For example, I realized that I was actually really effective in the morning, which surprised me because I am not really a morning person. And also, I realized that it usually took me longer to do tasks at night, which again was surprising because I always felt really productive at night when there were no distractions. But after being really aware of my time and my tasks, I realized that I was actually making more errors and I was slower. So the same task would take me around 10 to 20% less time if I just did it during the morning. And I could get that same level of no distractions just by putting on some headphones and just removing the distractions from my environment. I also realized that my efficiency goes up just before lunch, just before dinner, and just before a workout or an appointment. I think this was just because I have more urgency because I know that there's something coming up imminently. And so this realization was really important because it made me start thinking about tasks not in isolation as just things that I block out on a calendar, but rather sequences of tasks that I chain throughout the day to keep me in optimum flow. This is something that I've paid a lot of attention to over the last few years, and it's probably the biggest technique that I use on a daily basis. Most days, I actually don't really have to worry about a lot of other things as long as I create a chain of events and tasks that keep me in flow. I'm generally pretty productive. Now, it does take some time and reflection to figure out what type of flow and sequence makes you most productive and what's optimum for you. So you're gonna have to do a little bit of trial and error to figure that one out. So putting all of these things together, here is how I schedule now. Thankfully, I don't do 100-hour weeks very often anymore, but I still think I'm a pretty busy person and this method of scheduling works more than good enough for me. I find it very easy, very sustainable, and most importantly, it actually allows me to enjoy life, which is important, by the way. So number one, I use Google Calendar, as you can see here. And before I go in and just start randomly adding random tasks in here, I'm going to take a step back and pick my losses. This is about prioritizing. It's genuinely more important than time management because it dictates what you're doing during that time. If you want to learn a little bit more about time management versus task management, then you can check out this video here. And what I'm gonna do during this step is really figure out what my top 1 or 2 biggest priorities are. What are the things that if I were to get them done, contribute to helping the future version of me the most? What would the future version of me be the most thankful for if I were to do it today? And then everything else is actually just centered around doing the 1 or 2 biggest priorities. So for example, let's say that the most important thing for me to do is to review these 5 lectures that I've covered. The question is then, where do I put it? So this is step number 3, which is creating generous time blocks while keeping the flow and sequence in mind. So I know I tend to do well with concentrated cognitive effort work in the morning, and studying and reviewing lectures seems like it should take a lot of cognitive effort, so therefore I'm going to schedule that in the morning. So let's make a time block here. I don't like waking up too early. And there we go, I've added my time block. Now here you can see that I've scheduled between 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., which is 3.5 hours. I know that reviewing 5 lectures should take me around 2 hours, so I'm overestimating the amount of time by around 30%. I used to overestimate by around 50%, but nowadays I'm pretty happy with 30%. But if you're just starting, start by being wider and more generous. When you do your time tracking, you'll get an idea about how wide your margin of error is for how long you think something will take versus how long it really did take. Now let's say that my second biggest priority for the day was to film an amazing YouTube video where I deliver great content for free. Okay, well, let's do that one in the afternoon. And I'm pretty comfortable with some margin of error that it's gonna take me a couple hours, so I'll block that out in the afternoon. So now we've got our 1 to 2 biggest priorities blocked out during the day. And everything else needs to fit around this. Remember, these are the things that you absolutely have to get done. These are the things that your future version would be most thankful for. So that's the reason why we make this the centerpiece and everything else fits around it. We're now gonna add our second and third tier priority tasks onto this schedule. And it doesn't really matter so much what is like third most important versus fourth most important versus fifth most important. What matters more is the type of task, how long it's gonna take, and how it's gonna influence our flow during the day. So let's say that the next items that I need to get done is I need to design a workshop and make some lesson resources. I wanna catch up with some members of my team on a project that I'm working on, and I wanna fit in a workout during the day. Well, I know that urgency is gonna help me focus a little bit, and I can see that there is some time before dinner after I've done my YouTube recording. I usually have dinner around 6 p.m. and it takes me around an hour, so I'm just gonna block that out of my calendar first. So the workshop design will take me probably around 2 hours. So overestimating, I need at least 3 hours, which means there isn't enough time to do it after my YouTube recording. Now, if I was not as good of a scheduler, aka me like 10 years ago, I would just be like, yeah, I can get it done, be really ambitious and just try to fit that in before dinner. But not anymore, because I know that that's just not gonna be worth it. So what I'll do is I'll schedule my workout in this 2 hours instead, because that's enough time for me, and it works out because it's during the day, I'll be relatively energized, I'll be able to eat straight afterwards, it works out well. Catching up with my team members around their project will only take probably around 30 minutes, and I can probably do that just around after lunch, just before I start my YouTube recording, and that means that I'll need to make sure I finish in time as well to get onto my recording. So I'll just schedule that there, team catch up. And my workshop design, I can do that after dinner, and during the evening, I know that I'm a little bit slower and I'm not able to concentrate quite as sharply, but doing a workshop design is fine. I mean, I've done hundreds of those before. I can do it pretty effortlessly, and it should be easy enough to do. And then after that, I'll schedule in some break time for myself to give me a good incentive to try to finish everything during the day. I'm gonna give myself an hour of playing games on my PS5 at the end of the day. And scheduling a break time, something to look forward to, is something that I would recommend as well. Like, you're gonna need it, so again, you may as well make your schedule realistically reflect your day. Also, I know that someone's gonna ask me in the comments, so I'll just tell you right now, the game that I'm playing is called Sea of Stars. And so just like that, I've made my schedule. And yes, it is from 9 a.m. till 10 p.m. And again, like I said, this is the type of schedule that you would have if you just work all day and you don't have anything else to do. Obviously, if there were other things, then you have to fit that into your schedule. If you've got lectures, if you've got appointments, if you've got family or social commitments, like, those are important as well. Okay, maybe lectures less so, but family and social commitments, those are also important. So you gotta make sure that you block out your time. But the principles are the same. You start with your biggest priorities, you block them out, your second, third tier priorities fit in, and you're really focusing on trying to maximize that flow while overestimating the amount of time that everything's gonna take. This process that I've just gone through with you right now, I will do this probably for 2 to 3 days at a time, but then every day I'll also just make some minor adjustments based on new things that arise. And so a common question that might arise is, well, what do I do about the things that I didn't have a chance to schedule? I need to get them done anyway. Where do they fit in? And that is where prioritization comes in. Remember what I said before, just because you've scheduled it in doesn't mean that you're gonna get it done. And in that situation, you lose anyway. At least this way, you get to control where your losses are and make a plan for how you can recover from it. Scheduling realistically with room for error shows you the true roadmap of how you can reach your goal. If you find that scheduling this way means that you're constantly having to drop tasks and not get them done, what this tells me is not that you need to fit more into your schedule to just ambitiously try to make it work. It tells me that you need to work on your methods to become more efficient. At the end of the day, if you schedule too ambitiously, you might be able to pull it off every once in a while, but probably not consistently, and you probably already know that. What's important is that we control and pick our losses so that we can figure out a plan to win the championship. For example, if you find that you're not able to study as much as you wanted to during a day, then you might need to improve your learning efficiency to be able to fit more in. And if you don't know how to be a more efficient learner, then you should be scheduling maybe 20 or 30 minutes a day just to learn how to learn more efficiently. By doing this, yes, you're losing out on the 20 or 30 minutes a day that you spent on learning to learn, but over a month, that might lead you to improve your overall learning efficiency by 20%, which is not uncommon. That means that a month from now, that version of you who's 20% more efficient can fit more in a day and actually start catching up. So when I think about my schedule now, if I can't fit everything that I need to get done into my schedule by following these principles, I know that the solution is to look at my methods and find a way to increase my efficiency. If I don't know how to increase my efficiency, what I need to do is allocate time to learn to be more efficient. Over time, I as a person become more capable and more efficient. Whereas if I spend all of my time on just trying to keep up without picking my losses and improving myself, then I know that eventually I'm just gonna fall behind because the future version of me is no better than the current version of me. If you want to start improving your time management, task management, or learning efficiency, but you don't know where to start, then check out this playlist that we've created for you where we cover the most important core principles that you need to follow. If you like this video, please subscribe so you don't miss my next one. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.